There are two kinds of men the moment disrespect shows up. The first one hears the tone, sees the smirk, feels the little jab in front of other people, and he combusts. He has to answer. He has to set the record straight. He has to prove right now that nobody talks to him like that. His voice gets louder. His hands start moving. His mind narrows into a tunnel where only one thing matters: winning this moment. And what does he call it? Strength. But it isn't strength, it's exposure. Because the second kind of man notices the same disrespect, and something colder happens. He doesn't argue, he doesn't defend, he doesn't perform outrage for the audience, he just goes still. He looks at the person like he's taking a measurement. Then he leaves cleanly. No speech, no explanation, no high road announcement. Just absence. And that's the part that unsettles people. Not because it's passive, but because it's unreadable. When you argue, you translate yourself. You give subtitles to your soul. You show them where the nerve is. You show them the button. You show them the speed of your trigger. You show them what you value most: your pride, your image, your need to be seen as the type who won't take it. And once they see the button, they don't have to fight you anymore. They can press you. That's what most men never understand about provocation. It's rarely about the insult itself. It's a test. Can I control his weather? Can I pull his attention off his mission and drag him into my little arena? Can I make him spend his energy proving something to me? Because if I can, I own him. Sun Tzu understood this in war long before people turned it into a motivational quote. When he says the supreme art is to subdue the enemy without fighting, he's not talking about being nice. He's describing a higher form of domination. The ability to deny the enemy what they came to steal. Your reaction, your time, your predictability. The moment you engage, you become a schedule they can plan around. The moment you react, you become a map. The moment you defend yourself, you hand them the blueprint to your ego. And this is where Machiavelli steps in, because he watched powerful men destroy themselves by taking every bait like it was a holy duty. Princes who believed every challenge had to be answered, every insult had to be punished, every petty conflict had to be handled immediately. So what happened? They became exhausted rulers of tiny victories. They won arguments and lost empires. They collected enemies like receipts. They bled attention into meaningless battles until, when the real threat arrived, they had no force left to answer it. No leverage, no alliances, no patience, no clarity. Just burnout in a crown. Meanwhile, the truly dangerous ones did something that looks weak to the insecure mind. They ignored battles that didn't serve the objective, not because they couldn't win, because winning wasn't the point. This is the difference between ego and strategy. Ego wants the emotional reward of, I showed him. Strategy wants the long-term advantage of, I'm still moving toward my goal while he's stuck thinking about me. And here's the ugly truth. Most men are addicted to being pulled. They think they're independent, but their nervous system is owned by other people's opinions. A stranger comments something disrespectful, and suddenly he's spending an hour crafting the perfect comeback like he's defending a nation in court. Why? Because his identity is fragile. It needs applause to breathe. So he trades something priceless, his energy, for something cheap. Temporary relief. And the person who provoked him learns a powerful lesson. If I want his attention, I just have to poke him. That's not strength. That's a leash. The second kind of man doesn't do that trade. He makes a calculation that most people are too emotional to make in real time. Does this matter tomorrow? Does this serve me? Does this person have any authority over my outcomes? And if the answer is no, he withdraws. Not with drama, not with insults, not with a performance of indifference. He simply removes access. And suddenly the power flips. Because the provocateur wanted a fight, but what they got was a void. And the human mind hates a void. It starts filling the silence with stories. Did he see it? Does he think I'm beneath him? Is he planning something? Why didn't that work on him? That confusion becomes pressure. That uncertainty becomes fear. And fear doesn't come from loudness. Fear comes from what can't be predicted. This is why silence, real silence, not sulking, terrifies people. It feels like standing at the edge of a dark ocean. You can't see what's under the surface, but you can feel the depth. You don't know if it's empty or if something is circling. Strategic withdrawal is that ocean. The weak man splashes at the surface to prove he's not afraid. The dangerous man doesn't splash. He disappears beneath the surface, and you're left staring into water that refuses to explain itself. So, before we go any further, let's make the frame clear. This isn't about being timid. This isn't about letting people walk on you. This is about refusing to fight wars that make you smaller. This is about choosing your battles so precisely that when you do engage, it doesn't look like emotion. It looks like inevitability. Because the silent skill isn't how to win every fight. It's how to become the kind of man who doesn't need to fight most of them. And once you understand that, the world starts feeling different because you stop living like a door anyone can knock on. You start living like a gate. Most men think power is loud. They think it announces itself. They think it argues, dominates, explains, corrects, overwhelms. They think if they don't respond, they lose something's status, respect, position. So they rush in, swinging words like fists, believing silence equals surrender. That belief is the trap. Because silence, when chosen, isn't empty. It's compressed force. Sun Tzu warned that the moment you engage an enemy on his terms, you've already paid a price. You've stepped into his terrain. You've accepted his framing. You've agreed without realizing it. That this battle matters as much to you as it does to him. That's the mistake. Most provocations are not attacks. They're invitations. Invitations to abandon your priorities and step into someone else's emotional economy. When you accept, you're no longer leading your life, you're responding to theirs. And here's what people don't like to admit. Reacting feels good in the short term. It gives the ego a hit of relief. It feels like standing your ground. But psychologically, it trains you to be interruptible. It conditions you to believe that any noise deserves your attention. That's how men become predictable. Predictability is weakness disguised as consistency. When someone knows exactly how you'll react, what insults trigger you, what tones provoke you, what accusations pull you into defense, they don't need to overpower you. They just need to time you. Strategic withdrawal destroys that advantage, because now the pattern breaks. The expected explosion doesn't happen. The argument never starts. The emotional exchange they prepared for collapses before it's born, and suddenly they're standing alone with the energy they tried to dump on you. This is where the real psychological shift happens. When you don't engage, you don't just deny them your reaction, you force them to confront themselves. The aggression has nowhere to land. The drama has no stage. The script they rehearsed becomes useless, and useless scripts make people uncomfortable. This is why Machiavelli observed that rulers who fought every challenge weakened their own authority. Authority isn't reinforced by constant enforcement. It's reinforced by selectivity. When everything becomes a battle, nothing feels decisive. But when you only move when it matters, movement itself becomes meaningful. Think about it like this. If a man speaks all the time, his words blur together. If a man only speaks when necessary, People lean in when he opens his mouth. The same applies to engagement. The same applies to conflict. The same applies to presence. Scarcity creates gravity. This is why withdrawal, real withdrawal, not sulking, creates a strange reversal. The person who tried to provoke you expected to occupy your mind. Instead, they end up occupied by you. They replay the moment. They analyze your lack of reaction. They invent meanings. Did he not care? Did I overestimate my importance? Did I misjudge him? And that unanswered question keeps working long after the insult fades. Most men can't tolerate that kind of silence, not from others, and especially not from themselves. Silence feels like loss of control. It feels like leaving a score unsettled. It feels like weakness because they confuse motion with effectiveness. But war doesn't reward motion. It rewards positioning. This is why Sun Tzu talks about roads not to be followed and battles not to be fought. He's describing discernment, the ability to see that some engagements, even when winnable, still cost more than they give. Every conflict takes something from you. Attention, emotional bandwidth, time you'll never get back. And once spent, that energy doesn't return just because you won. The weak man asks, "Can I win this?" The dangerous man asks, "What does winning this actually give me?" Most of the time, the answer is nothing but temporary ego satisfaction and long-term distraction. Look at modern life, and you'll see this everywhere. Office politics thrive on reaction. People bait, whisper, escalate, not because the issue matters, but because engagement creates leverage. The man who reacts becomes involved. The man who stays calm and distant becomes difficult to manipulate, not because he's above it, because he's unavailable to it. Availability is the most underestimated form of power. If you're always reachable, always responsive, always willing to explain yourself, you're easy to manage. Your presence becomes expected, and what's expected stops being valued. Withdrawal changes that equation. When you don't rush to respond, people start adjusting to you instead of the other way around. They become careful. They hesitate. They wonder if this is the moment you finally decide to move. Silence turns you from a participant into a variable, and variables make systems unstable. This is why strategic withdrawal isn't passive. It's active restraint. It's the discipline to delay gratification, the gratification of proving yourself in exchange for something far more powerful, long-term leverage. It's choosing not to swing at shadows. It's understanding that not every disrespect is a threat, and not every threat deserves your presence. Imagine a man standing in the middle of a storm. One man swings at the wind, shouting, trying to dominate it. He exhausts himself and the storm doesn't notice. The other man steps back, watches the patterns, waits. When the storm passes, he's still standing. That's the difference. One mistakes reaction for strength. The other understands timing, and timing, more than force, is what decides outcomes. By the time most men realize this, they've already wasted years fighting battles that never move their life forward. Arguments no one remembers. Conflicts that changed nothing. Emotional wars that burned energy but built no position. Strategic withdrawal is the moment you stop feeding those fires. It's the moment you stop being pulled and start choosing. And once you make that shift, something subtle but irreversible happens. People stop testing you as much, not because you intimidate them, but because they no longer know what happens when they do. Here's why most men will never master this skill. It isn't because they don't understand it intellectually. It's because their ego can't survive it emotionally. Ego hates silence. Ego needs response. Ego interprets disrespect as a threat to identity, not a strategic data point. So the moment someone challenges him, his nervous system fires like an alarm. Fight back, or be erased. React, or be diminished. That's the illusion. In reality, reacting is what makes you small, because the man who needs to explain himself is already negotiating from a lower position. The man who needs to defend his image has already admitted that his image is fragile, and the man who cannot walk away has quietly confessed that other people control his emotional state. Strategic withdrawal requires something most people lack: internal sufficiency. You have to already know who you are without needing the room to agree. You have to be grounded enough that someone else's opinion doesn't feel like a verdict. Until that happens, silence will feel unbearable, like suffocation. This is why social media exposes weakness so brutally. Someone types a few careless words, and suddenly a man who claims to be disciplined is spiraling. He's crafting responses, rereading insults, refreshing the screen, emotionally negotiating with someone he will never meet. Why? Because his ego needs closure. Closure is the drug. Closure is the feeling that this is resolved. I was right. They know it. And engaging even angrily provides closure. It gives the mind a beginning, middle, and end. But power doesn't come from closure. Power comes from unresolved tension. When you withdraw without explanation, you deny closure. You leave a hanging thread, and the human brain cannot stand loose ends. It keeps returning to them, chewing on them, trying to resolve them. This is why silence lingers longer than arguments. An argument ends. Silence echoes. Machiavelli understood this dynamic intuitively. He knew that fear doesn't come from cruelty alone. It comes from uncertainty, from not knowing how someone will respond, from not knowing where you stand with them. Predictable men are easy to manage. Mysterious men are dangerous. And strategic withdrawal is how mystery is maintained. Nowhere is this more visible than in relationships. A weak man equates reaction with care. When tested, he responds emotionally. He argues. He reassures. He chases. He explains his intentions in detail, thinking transparency will save him. But what he actually proves is that he can be moved at will, that his attention is elastic, that his emotional state is negotiable. A dangerous man does something that looks almost cruel to the untrained eye. He doesn't rush to fix the tension. He doesn't plead his case. He steps back and observes, not as a tactic, as an evaluation. Is this behavior respectful? Is this dynamic adding value or draining it? Is this person aligned with the direction I'm moving, or are they testing whether they can redirect me? If the answer is misalignment, he withdraws. Quietly, completely. And that withdrawal hits harder than any argument ever could. Because arguments keep the connection alive. Withdrawal threatens it. It introduces the possibility of loss, and loss changes behavior faster than words. This is the part most men sabotage. When the other person reaches out confused, uncomfortable, sensing the shift, the instinct is to explain, to clarify, to be mature, and talk it out. But explanation is re-entry. Explanation gives closure. Explanation restores their sense of control. Silence, maintained, forces the other person to sit with the uncertainty they created. And here's the brutal truth. People reveal their real intentions in how they react to your withdrawal. Some reflect, some adjust, some escalate, some lash out. That reaction tells you everything you need to know without you saying a word. This principle extends to every environment. In the workplace, the man who avoids every drama cycle becomes the man people hesitate to involve. Not because he's weak, but because he doesn't reward chaos with attention. His time feels protected. His energy feels intentional. People sense when someone is not available for nonsense. And availability, again, is the lever. Most men think respect comes from confrontation. In reality, respect comes from boundaries that don't need defending. When you don't argue about your limits, they solidify. Silence draws a line without drawing attention to it. Now, let's clarify something critical. Strategic withdrawal is not permanent avoidance. It's not cowardice. It's not fear of conflict. It's emotional positioning. You withdraw when engagement would cost more than it gives. You engage when the stakes are real, the conditions favor you, and the outcome matters. Weak men engage because they feel provoked. Strong men engage because they've decided to. This distinction changes everything. Sun Tzu warned against fighting on terrain chosen by the enemy. In modern life, that terrain is often emotional. Someone wants to fight you on outrage, embarrassment, urgency. They want to rush you into reaction before clarity can form. Withdrawal breaks that tempo. It buys you time. Time cools emotion. Time reveals patterns. Time separates signal from noise. Most conflicts feel urgent in the moment and irrelevant a week later. Strategic withdrawal lets that truth surface before you commit energy. Think of it like stepping off a moving treadmill. Everyone else is running, sweating, competing for speed. You step off, and suddenly you see how pointless the motion was. That clarity is power, because once you stop reacting, you start choosing, and choice is the foundation of dominance. By the time you're ready to engage again, if you choose to, the dynamic has shifted. You're no longer responding, you're acting. And action, when rare, carries weight. Silence isn't empty. It's a chamber where pressure builds, and pressure, when released deliberately, changes outcomes. The question is whether you can tolerate that pressure without breaking your own discipline. Now we get tactical. Because strategic withdrawal only becomes real power when you know how to use it, when to step back, when to stay silent, and when to return. Most men fail here. They either react to everything, or they withdraw forever out of bitterness. Both are weak. Power lives in discernment. Sun Tzu gives us the framework, even if most people never apply it to modern life. Before any engagement, he evaluated conditions, not emotions, conditions. Translated into your world, the first question is simple. What is actually at stake? Not what it feels like, not how it looks. What is real? If someone insults you online, what's at stake? Nothing. Your life doesn't change. Your income doesn't change. Your future doesn't change. Only your ego feels touched, so you withdraw. But if someone is actively trying to damage your reputation with people who can affect your career, now the terrain shifts. Now silence may cost more than engagement. So you don't react emotionally, you plan. That's the difference. The second question, whose terrain is this? Machiavelli was obsessed with this. Never fight where your enemy is strongest. If someone drags you into an argument on their platform, in front of their audience, framed by their narrative, you've already lost positional advantage. Withdrawal, in this case, isn't avoidance, it's refusal. You don't win by speaking louder in someone else's arena. You win by removing yourself and choosing a ground where you control timing, context, and consequences. The third question, what is the cost? Every engagement costs something. Time, focus, emotional bandwidth, sometimes reputation. Even when you're right, the cost may outweigh the benefit. Weak men only calculate whether they'll win. Strong men calculate what the win costs them. If the price is distraction from your mission, fragmentation of your energy, or emotional residue that follows you for days, the smart move is silence. The fourth question is the most important. Am I emotionally compromised? If you're angry, hurt, embarrassed, or reactive, you withdraw automatically. No exceptions. Decisions made in emotional heat are rarely strategic. They feel justified in the moment and embarrassing in hindsight. Strategic withdrawal gives you time to cool the system, regain clarity, and decide from strength instead of impulse. Here's a truth that will save you years of wasted conflict. Most things that feel urgent right now won't matter in a week. The disrespect you almost responded to? Forgotten. The argument you almost had? Dissolved. The battle you almost fought? Irrelevant. Withdrawal lets urgency die so relevance can speak. Now, when do you engage? You engage when the stakes are real, when silence would invite further violation, and when you can end the conflict decisively. Not dramatically. Decisively. Weak men engage repeatedly. Strong men engage once. This is why truly powerful people seem calm even when they act forcefully. They waited. They calculated. They didn't move until the outcome was already tilted in their favor. Think of strategic withdrawal like pulling back a blade before the strike. The pullback isn't weakness. It's preparation. Without it, there is no force. This is also why disappearing done correctly is one of the most destabilizing moves you can make. When someone is draining, manipulative, or consistently disrespectful, you don't announce boundaries with speeches. You don't negotiate basic respect. You reduce access. Gradually, quietly, cleanly. No accusations, no explanations, no emotional exit. Just less availability, and then gone. This creates a psychological shock. People expect friction. They expect closure. They expect conflict. When none comes, their mind searches for control and can't find it. They reach out. They ask questions. They test. This is the critical moment. If you explain, you re-enter. If you justify, you surrender leverage. If you defend, you reopen the door. So you stay vague, calm, non-committal. I've been busy. Handling some things. All good. True enough to not be a lie. Empty enough to reveal nothing. And then you remain distant. This is the hardest part for most men, not the withdrawal, but holding it. Because people will try to provoke you back. They'll accuse you of being cold, immature, afraid, avoidant. That's the last test. Can you let them be uncomfortable without rescuing them? Because the moment you try to make them feel better about your absence, you give up the power the absence created. Machiavelli would tell you this plainly. They can call you whatever they want. As long as they can't control you, you're winning. Strategic withdrawal only works when it's complete. Partial silence invites negotiation. Complete silence creates reorientation. And once you master this, something shifts permanently. You stop being reactive. You stop being pulled. You stop mistaking noise for importance. Your energy becomes concentrated instead of scattered. And when you do choose to step forward again, it doesn't feel like response. It feels like gravity. Because now, you're not moving out of ego. You're moving out of position. Now I want you to see the end of this path, because this is where the shift becomes permanent. Picture two men. The first one is always in motion, always explaining, always defending, always involved. He tells himself he's strong because he never backs down. But look closer. His energy is scattered. His focus is fractured. He lives in reaction mode, jumping from conflict to conflict like a man fighting reflections in broken glass. Every person who knows how to provoke him owns a piece of his life. He thinks he's in control because he's loud. But loudness is often just panic with confidence. The second man moves differently. He doesn't rush. He doesn't chase resolution. He doesn't feel compelled to correct every misunderstanding. He lets things remain unfinished if finishing them would cost him clarity. He chooses his moments, and because he chooses, his presence carries weight. When he's there, people notice. When he's silent, people feel it. When he withdraws, something destabilizes, not because he's cruel, but because he's not available on demand. This is the realization most people never reach. Your presence only has value if you're willing to remove it. If you're always accessible, always responsive, always ready to engage, your presence becomes cheap, predictable, taken for granted. But the man who can disappear, the man who can walk away from disrespect, drama, and low-stakes conflict without explanation, turns himself into a variable, and variables change systems. This is why strategic withdrawal terrifies people. It forces them to confront a possibility their ego hates, that they may not matter to you as much as they thought. And that realization cuts deeper than any argument ever could. Sun Tzu said all warfare is based on deception. Appear weak when you are strong, strong when you are weak. Strategic withdrawal is the most elegant form of that deception. It looks like retreat to the insecure eye. But in reality, it's refusal. Refusal to be baited. Refusal to be managed. Refusal to fight wars that don't serve you. It's not avoidance, it's altitude. From higher ground, you see what's worth engaging and what's just noise. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. This is why the truly powerful rarely look busy fighting. They're busy building. They conserve energy. They protect focus. They let lesser men exhaust themselves proving points that won't matter tomorrow. So here's your assignment, not as theory, but as practice. For the next week, treat your attention like currency. When someone tries to provoke you, pause. When drama invites you in, decline. When you feel the urge to explain yourself, stop and ask one question. Does this battle serve me? Not my ego, not my image, me. If the answer is no, withdraw, silently, completely, without announcement. Watch what happens. Watch how much energy you reclaim. Watch how calm replaces urgency. Watch how people's behavior toward you changes when you stop being predictable. Some will respect you more. Some will grow uncomfortable. Some will reveal themselves completely. All outcomes are useful, because once you stop reacting, you start seeing clearly. Machiavelli and Sun Tzu weren't teaching men how to be liked. They were teaching men how to remain sovereign, how to move through conflict without being consumed by it, how to win not by fighting harder, but by fighting less. Power is not constant motion. Power is restraint. Power is knowing that you don't owe anyone a reaction, an explanation, or a piece of your life just because they demand it. When weak men fight every battle, they exhaust themselves into irrelevance. When strong men walk away from what doesn't serve them, they become untouchable. Your silence becomes your power. Your absence becomes your weapon. Your discipline becomes your shield. That is the silent skill. That is what Machiavelli and Sun Tzu understood. And now the question isn't whether this works. The question is whether you're strong enough to use it. And here's the final truth most men never confront. One day, you will realize how much of your life was spent reacting, explaining yourself to people who never mattered, fighting battles that never moved you forward, leaking energy into noise disguised as importance. And that realization will either harden you or free you. Power is not loud. It does not rush to be understood. It does not beg for recognition. Real power is quiet, selective, and disciplined. It knows when to stand firm and when to vanish. When you master strategic withdrawal, you stop living as a target and start living as a force. People can no longer pull you, provoke you, or drain you at will. Your silence reshapes the dynamic. Your absence recalibrates respect. Walk away from what doesn't serve you. Protect what does, because the man who controls his reactions controls his future.